Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So, the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. In this show, we cover mythology, legends, and folktales, and history. Today's episode is firmly in the history category. I want to add a disclaimer here. As with previous history episodes, and in order not to sound like a boring Wikipedia article, I have taken creative liberties with the communication between the 17th century characters in order for it to be understood by a 21st century audience. We storytellers have to do this all the time. Otherwise, no one will listen to us, and we'd be sad, lonely folks. I have had a listener specifically request a story of Shivaji Maharaj, and it's absolutely fitting considering that the upcoming Friday is Shivaji's birthday. So here we are. We'll cover a couple of incidents from Shivaji's life. One, when he was a teenager and making a mark for himself, and another, when he shook up medieval Indian news networks by doing something completely unexpected and establishing a new balance of power. Shivaji was the son of Shahaji, a general in the Bijapur Sultanate, not to be confused with the Mughal Empire or the Ahmednagar Sultanate. A general's life was not easy. It meant frequent travel, and that also meant time away from family. Except, Shahji solved that problem by maintaining two families, one in Bangalore and the other in Shivneri. Well, his Shivneri wife had a child, and that child was named Shivaji. Not after Shiva the Destroyer out of the Holy Trinity, but after a local goddess, Shivai. Shivaji's early education was highly influenced by his mom, Jizabai. He had a healthy dose of Indian mythology. It was a big part of his education. Exactly the kind of stuff we cover on this podcast. Much of what he did later in life was also influenced by these learnings. So maybe I can claim some credit for inspiring some of his achievements. Our story starts not in Shivneri and not in Bijapur, but in Torna. Torna is a large fort near Pune in Maharashtra. In the year 1646, it was being ruled by Inayat Khan. Inayat Khan administered the region for the very same Bijapur Sultanate that Shahji was serving. The scene is the war council chambers of Inayat Khan. Any administrator needs a bunch of officers to administer for him. This was their equivalent of a daily morning meeting. Yes, office traditions are older than you think. Inayat Khan's personal secretary began. We have 14 items on the agenda today. First up is the Honorable Undersecretary from the Torna Finance Division. A middle aged bureaucrat spoke up. Honorable General Inayat Khan, sir, my dear colleagues, the adolescent progeny of one of your distinguished peers refuses to contribute to the enrichment of the Sultanate's revenue streams. thereby raising the possibility of a rejection of the government authority, which could lead to a condition of organizational atrophy that will render difficult the effective discharge of the functions of His Majesty Adil Shah's Sultanate of Bijapur. Inayat Khan couldn't make head or tail of that. He glanced at his secretary, who then quickly provided a translation. He means your colleague's son isn't paying his taxes. Who is this upstart? Asked Inayat Khan. His name is Shivaji, sir, son of Shahji, replied the personal secretary, quickly answering the question before the Honorable Undersecretary could launch into chapter and verse. I've had enough of this Shivaji. A month ago, we had heard complaints about him raising an army. He claimed they were just friends from school. I'll have to deal with him myself. Down with Shivaji, said one yes man. Long live Inayat Khan, said another. Next, called out Inayat, ignoring them completely. Next up was the Honorable Deputy Secretary of Defense Planning, who was there to complain about the rusty locks on the gates of the unmanned entrances to the fort. He wanted a bigger budget for posting extra guards there, or at least reinforcing the doors, or maybe changing the locks. Inayat Khan promised to look into it. Inayat Khan promised to look into it, just like he had done the last dozen times. Before the next item could be brought up, however, the doors to the council chamber burst open, and a young man walked in. The council was stunned into silence. Howdy, boys, said the boy, closing the doors behind him. He then grabbed an empty chair and propped his feet up on the table. The personal secretary finally found his voice. Who are you? This is completely out of order. You can't be here without paperwork, in advance and in triplicate. There is no room on the agenda for you. Actually, said the boy, you'll find that there is. If you look closely at your agenda, you'll see where it says 9:15 a.m. Negotiations with Shivaji Bhosle. The personal secretary adjusted his glasses and said, It is 9:15 a.m. right now, but no, I definitely don't see that written in my notes. Oh, I see now. You meant that as a threat. You used the T word, I didn't, replied the boy. What do I know? I'm just in high school. So you're Shivaji Bhosle? Asked Inayat. Are you here to give yourself up? Shivaji rolled his eyes. I am the one sitting here, unceremoniously, talking to you like I own this room. And you think I'm about to give myself up? No. Quite the opposite. I'm here to fight for your safety, your well being. Inayat Khan took out his sword and placed it calmly on the table. You are not carrying a weapon. We can see that. We are the ones with swords. That's true, said Shivaji. I don't have a weapon, and that's because I mean no harm. On the contrary, I want to save you from my trigger happy army that is waiting outside. Ha! Said the personal secretary. Got you! So you admit you were raising an army. I knew it. They weren't just friends. Now we'll get you on perjury. Inayat Khan and Shivaji both looked at each other. Bureaucrats, what can I do? Inayat Khan seemed to say, as he shrugged. Shivaji nodded sympathetically. My dear fellows, he said, they may be my army, but they are all friends of mine. All 10,000 of them. At this, the mood in the room suddenly changed to panic. How did you get so many soldiers in here so quickly? Asked the Deputy Secretary of Defense. It was the rusty locks on the unmanned entrances to the fort, wasn't it? Despite the situation, the Deputy Secretary was actually proud. I told you so, his tone screamed at the rest of the room. Shivaji smiled. You practically invited us all in. But don't worry, most of my friends don't want to throw you off the fort walls. All of the officials began to worry now. Shivaji continued. Most of them prefer to simply stuff you into cannons and see how far you land. But me, I want you to go home safe and sound. And as long as I get what I need, you'll get what you need. Inayat Khan had begun to worry now. He signaled to his personal secretary and said, Go outside and check if he's telling the truth. Yes, please, said Shivaji eagerly. My friends have strict instructions. Anyone who attempts to leave is promptly killed. I really should have mentioned that as an alternative to the ropeless bungee jumping off the fort walls and the human cannonball. I think your end will be just as painful, but at least my friends will try to make it quick. The personal secretary hesitated at that. He turned back to Inayat Khan. I must decline your order, sir. You have not submitted a notarized order to my office in triplicate. Inayat Khan growled. But that was pretty much all he could do. He didn't dare step out of the council chamber himself. He knew he was beaten. All right, what do you need? He asked the boy. Oh, nothing much, said Shivaji. Just sign over your powers to me, and you can walk out of here. I'll even give you a pension. Live your retirement out in luxury. Reluctantly, Inayat Khan signed over the transfer of powers. Down with Inayat, said a yes man. Long live Shivaji, said another. Inayat's defeat was so complete, he didn't even object when Shivaji locked him in a broom closet. The new ruler motioned the meeting to continue without him. And with that, Shivaji stepped out of the council chamber. He waved casually at Inayat Khan's soldiers, who had been waiting outside the whole time, oblivious to the drama going on inside. They were taken aback when Shivaji informed them that he was their new master. But the paperwork, with Inayat's signature, was absolutely genuine. And that's all it took for them to switch their allegiance. Shivaji strolled out of the offices and to a nearby tea shop where his friends were waiting for him. Both of them. He showed them the papers. The fort is ours, boys. Shivaji's friends were shocked and wanted to know how he had done it. I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, he replied. And just like that, in a completely bloodless coup, the 15-year-old Shivaji had become the administrator of the fort. But for him, this was just the beginning. While other kids his age were busy collecting coins and shiny looking rocks, Shivaji was collecting forts. In just 3 short years after capturing Torna, Shivaji had added 3 more forts to his collection. Meanwhile, Adil Shah, the Bijapur Sultan, was grumpy. I have lost 4 forts to this guy in 4 years? How can I keep control of my empire if my people hear that run rate? And this is just the opportunity the Mughals need to take over my sultanate. Is this Shivaji guy a Mughal agent? He asked, suddenly panicking with the realization. No, sir, he's fighting with the Mughals, replied his wazir, or advisor. Now, that's just what a secret agent would do, wouldn't he? Said Adil Shah. I'm sure that's it. Who can tell me more about this Shivaji guy? And I don't mean what we have in the files. I need deep, personal background. That should not be a problem, Your Majesty, said the Wazir. Your General Shahji is the perfect source. Shahji? He knows the boy? Asked Adil Shah. He's Shivaji's father, Your Majesty, replied the Wazir. Adil Shah dropped his coffee cup in shock. My greatest enemy's father is my employee, and you think to tell me now? Shahji was promptly summoned. He had to get over the initial confusion, given he had more than one son in more than one place. But when that was cleared up, Shahji flat out refused to rat out his son. It's not business, it's personal, he said. But Adil Shah decided to make it personal. He had Shahji put in prison, thinking that that would pressure Shivaji. It worked, but briefly. You see, Adil Shah had found what he thought would be a much better solution to this problem. So, he released Shahji and unleashed his trump card. Adil Shah's general, Afzal Khan, had just won him a bunch of victories down south. He had attacked and defeated the remnants of the Vijayanagaram Empire. Yes, the very same Vijayanagaram that Thanali Raman lived in a century earlier. Afzal Khan had accomplished a great military victory for Adil Shah. And what should a good ruler do when a general accomplishes a huge victory on one front? Of course, he sends him to accomplish something similar in the other direction. Well, as financial advisors often advise, past performance is not an indicator of future results. That's what Adil Shah was about to find out. Afzal Khan was not the kind who would rush into things without first gathering some intelligence. He was a smart cookie. He had done some research on Shivaji and he had found out how Shivaji had tricked his way into capturing some forts. Afzal had even talked to the British East India Company. The British advised him that military strength alone would not work. Nevertheless, Afzal Khan tried military strength first. It didn't work out so well. For one thing, Afzal Khan did not have the proper equipment to trouble Shivaji's troops at Pratapgarh. And Shivaji's troops, despite the high ground, were unable to overcome Afzal Khan's well-trained troops. They were stuck in a stalemate for a couple of months. Neither side seemed to be giving in. But Shivaji's advisors were convinced that they could not hold out indefinitely. They suggested negotiating peace. Afzal could have waited out Shivaji, but I guess he was in a hurry. The conquest of Vijayanagaram had been easy, and now he had a personal record to beat. So Afzal sent someone to negotiate peace on his behalf. He sent a hand delivered letter to Shivaji. It went something like this: Hi Shivaji, you probably don't remember me, but I am a friend of your father's from work. I remember you from the last Bring Your Son to Work day. You were just a little boy. It's great to see you grown up, conquering forts and all. But honestly, I worry as well. I don't want anything bad to happen to my favorite coworker's favorite son. So let's catch up over coffee sometime. I have quite the sway with Adil Shah. I can get him to treat you favorably. You may get to keep all your kingdom. We'll even make you a general in Adil Shah's empire. I bet your dad will be proud. Come and meet me in my camp. I promise we'll have a nice, quiet chat. P.S. I've enclosed 5 rupees that I owed your father from the last time we had an office pizza party. Well, that gesture was not fooling Shivaji. He was absolutely certain that Afzal Khan was up to no good. Shivaji dispatched a letter, similarly glowing. Dear Afzal, of course I remember you. I would love to meet you for a coffee catch up. But I'm afraid, given the present state of things, and the tiny fact that we have been at war for the last 2 months, I very much prefer that we meet at a neutral place. Like maybe the base of Pratapgarh. P.S. Thanks for the 5 rupees, but I've enclosed it here again. It's best if you give it to him yourself. You're more likely to see him than I am. Afzal Khan agreed to the meeting at the base of Pratapgarh. I guess he thought he had nothing to fear. Even in a one-on-one situation, Afzal Khan had the seemingly upper hand. Shivaji was an average-sized man, but Afzal Khan was a giant, sort of like Hagrid from Harry Potter. 7 feet tall, some say, although that is a bit of an exaggeration. He was definitely not more than 6 feet and 11 inches. It's not that I measured his height myself, I just have knowledge of everything, remember? I could also tell you when he lost his first baby tooth, or what flavor cake he had on his birthday, or what his investment portfolio consisted of. But all that is irrelevant. It's hard being me and ignoring all the mountains of information I have access to. Anyway, enough about me. Back to the story. At the appointed date, Shivaji showed up on time. But Afzal Khan was early. He was already inside the tent, waiting for Shivaji. They each had a bodyguard, of course. Even when they said, "Come alone," bodyguards were never excluded. But they had to keep their distance. They were certainly not allowed inside the tent with Shivaji and Afzal. The moment Afzal saw Shivaji enter the tent, he stood up and held out his arms. "Come, give your favorite uncle a hug," he said. "I'll give you a candy bar." Well, I suppose there is no harm in us greeting each other politely, said Shivaji and stepped forward. Afzal Khan towered over him and gave him a bear hug. Suddenly, he pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and brought it down hard onto Shivaji's back. Except, it didn't work. What? Asked Afzal, surprised. That's not how daggers are supposed to work. But Shivaji was not going to patiently explain that he had put on metal armor under his clothes. A simpler explanation might work. Afzal Khan, I am Superman, the man of steel. Now let me show you my Wolverine claws. And with that, he pushed his sharp claws into Afzal Khan. Not his natural claws. He had custom made claws that were cleverly disguised to resemble rings. They were quite effective in a retaliatory attack against your father's co workers who tried to stab you in the back while pretending to embrace you. That was the end of Afzal Khan. But there's more to what Shivaji did. He had taken the time to hide his troops in strategic pockets all around Afzal Khan's camp. The moment Afzal was no more, Shivaji gave a signal, which was to someone who fired a cannon in response. He didn't fire the cannon at Shivaji. The firing of the cannon was a signal to the hidden troops, who then took Afzal Khan's army by surprise. It did end on a good note for the soldiers in Afzal's army. They were completely in Shivaji's power, true. And this was centuries before the Geneva Convention. But despite that, Shivaji let the soldiers and officers go as a sign of goodwill. That worked. Temporarily. For a short while, there were no major confrontations between Shivaji's empire and the Bijapur Sultanate. That goodwill gesture was not the only reason, though. A big problem for Adil Shah and his successors was the Mughal Empire, which was encroaching on their territory. That's all I have for this week. A couple of notes on the show. Like I said earlier, most of the communication between these characters is completely fictitious. There are some links on the site sfipodcast.com to accurate historical events. I've also linked some pictures of the forts mentioned on this episode, Torna and Pratapgarh. Check those out. Some other forts don't feature in today's episode, but they are quite spectacular to look at, including some sea forts, which is to be expected as Shivaji had also created a large coastal navy. That's all I have for this week. In the next episode, we'll cover a less known folktale from the northern territory of Ladakh. Like most folktales, it includes magic. And in this case, it means a box that can protect you from anything, and fairies that cry and shed gems instead of tears. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. Thanks to all of you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next time.